My name is John Grishpole. I am the co-owner of Maxable, MaxableSpace.com. We host webinars every month about ADUs and working with contractors and working through the process. I will admit, Maxable is not an SB9 company. Maxable is truly an ADU company, but there are a lot of similarities and some differences between an SB9 unit and ADU. And frankly, 95% of the people who I've talked to about ADUs have also asked about SB9. So we figured this would be a great opportunity for all of you to learn a little bit more about what SB9 is, what exactly it means, who's eligible, how it works, and all of those details. So with me today, I would like to introduce Gloria Rikers from Rikers Engineering. They are the #1 lot split specialist in California. They've done the most. They've been doing this for the longest. So when it comes to having an expert to share some wisdom with you guys, I knew Gloria was the right partner to have here. So Gloria, welcome.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. Super excited to be here, and I'm honored that everyone showed up and shared their time with us. So, super excited to share everything I know about SB9 in a digestible way for y'all.
Perfect. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about SB9, which really talks about two different things, lot splits and two-unit development. But today we're going to talk about really what those two aspects to SB9 are. You'll get a good understanding of the high-level costs and the timelines associated with either of those projects, and also what you need to know about eligibility and requirements for an SB9, whether it's a lot split or a two-unit or both. Like I said, there are a lot of similarities and differences between SB9 units and ADU units. So I want to make sure that we cover those details. And then finally, we'll jump into some examples of how you can use SB9 on your lot, how you can use ADUs combined with SB9. And like you guys saw in the form that we initially had you guys sign up with, we have many, many, many amazing, really great questions that we will save until the end. So if you do have questions, if any thoughts come up during this presentation, go ahead and drop it in the chat. We have a ton of questions to go through, but we'll do as much as we can with the time that we have. And with that said, let's go ahead and do the first poll of the day. So I want to know from you guys what you're thinking. Where are you coming from? How much do you understand about SB9? So the first question is, where are you in your SB9 journey? Is this something that you just heard about and you're just starting to explore? Is this something that you have already done some research on and you're certain that you're about to get going? This webinar is the only thing holding you back from moving forward on that project? Or are you already in the trenches and maybe you're on the session because it's confusing, it's difficult, and you want an extra set of eyes? So are you already in design? Is your project already in permitting? I'd love to know. And then many of you have probably already seen the follow-up question, but which of the SB9 options are you considering? The urban lot split or a two-unit development, if you know the difference? Are you considering doing both in tandem, or are you still just exploring what SB9 is and you're not even sure which of those options is right for you? Let's give it another minute. Okay, so it looks like 60% of you are just exploring. 30% are planning to start the project this year. That's really great. And it looks like, let me see if I can share these results. How does that work? I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but yeah, so about 60% are exploring, 30% of you are planning on starting this year, so you've come to the right place. We're going to give you tons of information and wisdom that you should know about SB9 to know if it's the right option for you and know what to do next about it. And then what type of SB9 path are you considering? 25% are considering just the lot split. Just 12% are considering the 2 unit, but it looks like a lot of you are here to learn about the differences, the similarities, how they can be used together and successfully. So thank you for that. I'm always curious where everyone is coming from. Um, so let's go ahead and get going. For any of you that are sharing a microphone or a camera, please just make sure that your microphone is muted so that there's no distractions or feedback during our presentation. Thank you very much. And let's continue. So first off, I've already started talking about what SB9 is and the differences between the different types, but we haven't even talked about what SB9 truly even is. So in short, SB9 is a California law that is allowed only on single family properties, and it can let you both split your lot and build up to 4 primary homes between those 2 lots, or it'll let you build 2 primary homes on an existing lot without a lot split. This was passed in 2021. It went into effect in January 2022. And ever since, just like with the ADU laws and regulations over the last 5 or 7 years, since then, there have been more and more augmentations, tweaks, changes to take that initial concept from 2021 and ensure that it works feasibly and works the way that it was intended and accomplishes those goals. And the reasoning behind SB9 is really 3 reasons. One, to increase housing stock. California is in the midst of a housing crisis. We need more housing units. So by increasing the housing stock and allowing people to build more units on their property, that will increase the amount of housing that we have in California. And along those lines, to some degree, this isn't a finance lesson, but to some degree, the more inventory there is, the more housing stock there is, that has the ability to to improve affordability of these homes, whether it is rentals or purchasing homes. By having more housing stock in more urban areas, that is one of the best ways to improve affordability. And along these same lines, it increases density. More homes in smaller spaces, creating stronger communities, and so on. We'll dive into more detail on how it works, but really the main things you need to know about how SB9 works is typically there is no public hearing needed. Your city or county or local agency will review projects ministerially using objective standards. Ministerial review just means that you don't need a public hearing. Staff can sign up based on these objective standards, written rules that are set in stone. And similarly, throughout the process, you'll work with civil engineers, surveyors to assist you throughout the process and sign off on the final project. Now, I mentioned there's 2 parts. In short, the 2-unit development option is the ability to add up to 2 primary homes on a single lot. So if you look at this example on the left here, you see a single family home that was here to begin with. This example adds another single family development. This is the SB9 unit without doing a lot split, and we'll get into more of the intricacies later, but you can also add an ADU to that same property without doing a lot split. And then this is the other version, the urban lot split arm of SB9. And here you probably had a single family home that was added onto and converted into a duplex. They split the lot. And then same thing here, you're allowed to have 2 primary dwellings on the same lot or on that new split lot. So first, we're going to talk about the 2-unit development provision. Many of you may have heard it referred to as the duplex provision. In short, like I said, it allows you to build up to 2 primary homes on one lot. And that can be attached, like the example we showed earlier with the duplex, or it can be detached. It can be a completely independent structure on that lot. You also have the option, because I've seen a lot of people asking this question, if you have a large single family home and it makes sense to split it, like the top level and the bottom level, or split in half down the middle and add a kitchen into the other unit, those would also fall under this 2-unit development provision. I'd say some of the key benefits when it comes to this aspect of SB9 is obviously it lets you add a second home for your family or for rental income. It's simpler and can be faster than splitting a lot relatively. We'll get into more of those details shortly, but unlike the lot split provision, there's no owner occupancy requirement for a 2-unit development. And finally, like I mentioned previously, and also as you can see in this example here, this is probably a junior ADU, but the 2-unit development provision can be coupled with ADUs and potentially junior ADUs as well. So you really have a lot of flexibility when looking at this option. And people always want to know, can my lot be used for SB9? Here's a few main things that you should prioritize or consider for the ideal best case scenario for using 2-unit development. You want a large lot, ideally a flat lot. If you are on a corner lot or have alley access, that can really simplify the process, because at the end of the day, you want to look for a way to take what was intended to be a single family lot and make it work in a duplex or a 2-unit situation. So the larger the lot is, the more entrances you have coming from the front or from the side. If it's a corner lot, that's a great option. A small existing home is ideal because it gives you the most space to work with. And then ideally, it'll be situated near the front or the rear property line. Again, just maximizing the amount of space that you have to work with. Ideally, no pool, because that's another difficult factor, because you have to fill the pool, or you have a big hole in the middle of your lot. That can really complicate things. And finally, ideally, you want a property with no HOA. HOAs do have the ability to restrict SB9 units, so avoiding that would be ideal. And then a little bit about the process and the costs involved. So 2-unit development is not too dissimilar from the permitting process with an ADU. Step one, you want to really just identify feasibility, understand what your options are, what your parameters are, and what parameters you need to stay within. And then with that, at that point, you can hire an architect. You can start developing those plans, establish what your goals are for the project, and really nail down the look and the feel and the approach for your project. Once you submit those plans, you'll need to make sure you have a full complete set with architectural plans, site plans, structural, Title 24, building permits, and all of that. And around that time is when you'll pay for your initial kind of submittal fees. Typically, you can expect to get some corrections on your proposal, so you'll work with your architect to make those revisions. And I'd say because SB9 is still relatively new, this is fairly common. And then you wait for approval. It can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, more realistically, depending on your jurisdiction. But once plans are approved, you're ready to begin construction. The duration of construction will depend on how big you are building and how busy it is and where you're located. But here I say that generally you can expect plan approval to take a few months, and construction can take 3 to 6 months, depending on the project itself.
Right. Thank you, John. That was a bunch of great information. So, just to clarify, what he spoke about was all about the 2-unit development provision of SB9. And now I'm going to speak about the other part of SB9, which has to do with splitting your lot. And so, this part of SB9 is subdividing your residential property into 2 separate parcels. And it can also go along with development, but it doesn't require development, so you can split and not develop. So I'll explain some of the basics about this. And I also noticed some questions coming into the chat, so at the end we'll have a Q&A and hopefully be able to answer all those questions. So when you do an SB9 lot split, each parcel will be allowed to have two primary houses on it. So similar to the SB9 development, you can have a total of four homes on the two lots. Or if you want, you can just split it and maintain your one primary residence, and you could either sell off the second vacant parcel or hang on to it as a nest egg indefinitely into the future. The reason why a lot of homeowners in California are so excited about this law and why my dad and I created this company to do lot splits is because there's some incredible benefits and opportunities for homeowners. First off, by doing a lot split alone, you're increasing your net property value by about 25 to 30%. Because if you think about it, in California, it is the land itself that can be built on that is so valuable. Everyone wants to build a home in California. So the fact that we can now create a separate legal real estate asset is huge. So you're looking at a significant property value increase. You're also, like I said, creating a sellable property. So if you want to recoup some income, you can sell off your backyard or your side yard and have a nice chunk of income coming in. You can build homes for family, for your children, for your parents, or increase your options for passive income with rentals. And like I said, there's no building required, so you can just sit on it as long as you want. And a question I get all the time is, will my taxes be reassessed? So you do the lot split, are you going to have to pay an arm and a leg on the property taxes? The short answer is no. So even though you're increasing property value by 25 to 35%, you're not having to pay taxes on that added value. It only gets reassessed if and when you sell off one of the properties. And the timeline for the lot split, it's a bit more of a grueling process than the SB9 development. When we first, like I said, my dad and I founded this company right before SB9 passed. My dad's a civil engineer, 45 years. He was retired, and he got so excited about the value here that we started a brand new company just to do this. We thought it was going to take us like 3 to 4 months to complete these projects because it's ministerial.
Hmm.
But in actuality, it takes us about 9 to 15 months to get these projects completed. There is still a lot of educating of the planning departments happening. They want to process it kind of like the old parcel maps, but it is quite different. So we're looking at, when you start a project, we're looking at feasibility. So if someone were to hire our company to do it, we would do everything I'm listing here. So we would take a look at the property, check out all the qualifiers. There's about 13 different criteria to check whether a property is eligible. Once we find that it is eligible, we'll prepare applications, we'll do map drafting, and we'll submit the application to the city or the county, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. Then we go through the whole tentative map review process, get that approved by the city or county. Then we'll do a topographic survey, a boundary survey, and submit the final parcel map. We go through another major submittal process with the city or county until they give us that final green check mark, and we can go ahead and record the map. Once the map is recorded, you technically and legally own a second property, and the day it's recorded, you could sell it that day to a new owner. All right, so here are a couple case studies how homeowners and our clients have used this. So we had one client who she already had a home and an ADU on her lot in Santa Clara. And so she just split her property, we split it for her, into two properties. So then her ADU was on a separate lot. As probably most of you know, if you have an ADU, now you can't sell it separately. It's essentially married to the home, married to the entire property. But once you split it, you can sell off the ADU. She sold it off for 1.4 million, and that led to a 600,000 net increase in value. And she didn't have to develop anything. She already had separate utilities, so it was super easy for her. Easy way to make a good amount of money. And then we had another client in Milpitas who hired us to create a vacant parcel. he was getting older. He wanted to downsize. He didn't need this huge home anymore, so he decided to split it. He could live on a smaller home on the new lot. He sold off the original lot for 2.9 million, and he ended up seeing a net value increase of 900,000. And the reason I say net value is because there will typically be a slight decrease in value of the parent property because you're reducing some of the land, but then like I said, you're creating a brand new real estate asset that can be sold. So that's that 30% net increase.
All right. So now we have a fairly good understanding of what is a lot split, what is a two-unit development, but the real question is, can you do it for your lot? So there are a lot of similarities between the two. There are a few differences, so let's start going through it. I've already seen some questions in the chat and certainly that were submitted that we can answer right away right here. So first off, uh, for either option of SB9, SB9 can only be used on a single family lot with single family zoning with a single family home. There are certainly some unique situations I've already seen where there's an R2 zoned lot, but it only has a single family home on it. Any of those scenarios get a little bit more particular and tricky, but generally single family zone in an urbanized area. And again, whether you use either option with SB9, you're allowed up to 2 primary units. That does not include ADUs, 2 primary units per lot, and 4 units total, including ADUs. And we'll show you some examples in a moment. They still both require a maximum of 4-foot side and rear setbacks for your lot. Local agencies must allow at least 800 square foot units. Now, some agencies can say you cannot build an SB9 unit larger than 800 square feet. I've been seeing more and more of that lately. Again, it will always come down to your local jurisdiction and their specific requirements. And they both have this protection of recently tenant occupied or protected units. So if there is a rent control or any other protections on those units, you cannot demolish those units. You cannot materially alter those units either. And also, an SB9 unit is not allowed in disqualifying hazard areas nor on historic properties. Hazard areas includes wetlands, farmlands, fire hazard areas, earthquake hazard areas, conservation, wildlife habitat, flood risk areas. There are a lot of reasons why cities don't want SB9 units and to increase densities in those types of areas. So it's not always a blanket, you cannot, but there are a lot of disqualifiers based on the area, the type of conditions on your lot. And then finally, one last similarity is that in either SB9 unit, short-term rentals are not allowed, typically, or at least for the time being, so nothing less than 30 days. However, there are a few small key differences, or not even necessarily small. There are a few key differences between lot splits and 2-unit. Gloria, would you like to cover those?
Yeah, I would love to. Thanks, John. And just one clarifying thing, there was just a law passed like 3 weeks ago that actually now allows historic properties to be split with SB9. So that's some good news. It was just passed and it'll go into effect in January. So that's a new update.
I should clarify that. Yeah, thank you, Gloria.
Yeah, no
It's
problem.
allowed in historic areas. It's allowed even potentially on historic properties as long as as long as there's no alterations to a historic structure, I believe. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds correct.
Yeah,
Everything's changing so quickly around here, so it's hard
got to
to
keep
keep up
up.
with it all. Yeah. Yeah, so for the lot split, there is a owner occupancy requirement where there's an affidavit document which the owner must sign saying that you intend to reside on the property for the next 3 years after the lot split. It's an interesting situation because some jurisdictions do allow a tenant to sign this affidavit rather than the owner, and it just depends on the jurisdiction. So if you're curious about this, you can reach out to us and we'll let you know if yours might qualify for that. Otherwise, typically the owner must sign this document saying they intend to reside there. That word intend is the key word because you may have the current intention to live there for 3 years now, but if you do decide to change your mind or sell or move, you aren't going to be reprimanded for that. So they just want to make sure that it's not a bunch of developers coming in and buying and flipping lots. They're trying to cut down on that, make sure that it is homeowners taking advantage of this law. Another requirement for the SB9 lot split is that the smaller of the two parcels must be at least 40% of the total area. So that's something to keep in mind. It can be a 50-50 split or a 40-60. And if it's a flag lot, that flag can typically be included as part of that 40% area. And each lot must be at least 1,200 square foot, so pretty small. And there's no minimum lot size for SB9 lot splits. So you can split a small lot as long as it's 2,400 square foot. And John, do you want to speak on the
Perfect.
2 unit
Yeah,
requirements?
I'd say the only differences are, for the most part, the opposite of what you just said. So with the 2 unit, there is no owner occupancy requirement. Um, it's kind of there is no minimum lot size for either, but a smaller than 2,400 square foot lot can still, in theory, be used for a 2 unit SB9. And this is kind of just a play on words, but while an SB9 lot split allows you to have up to two primary dwellings on each, just based on the logic around it, with a 2 unit development, you can have two primary dwellings on the same lot and also two ADUs on that same lot potentially. So um, mostly the same, a lot of similarities, but there are a few of these key differences. I do realize, by the way, it is 10:34. I always schedule these for 30 minutes, but clearly SB9 is a very detailed topic. So if anyone needs to hop out, I'm not offended. I will send the recording to anyone who registered for the session, but we have a few more slides to cover and then we'll get into questions. So as long as you guys are willing to stick around, we're happy to keep going through it. So the next thing, and another big question that I hear all the time, is, well, what's the difference between SB9 and ADU? And again, there are a lot of similarities. They both allow you to increase density on your lot. They both allow you to add another independent living unit, but there are some key differences. So an SB9 unit is a primary dwelling. It is the exact same designation as the existing single family home, whereas an ADU is an accessory home. It's an accessory structure. So it's just looked at a little bit differently. When it comes to saleability, like Gloria has mentioned, with an SB9 lot split, that separate parcel, that is purely independent now. It has its own APN. You can sell it separately, whereas in most cases, an ADU cannot be sold separately. AB 1033 is one of those new regulations that has come up in the last few years, I believe. But most cities are not very fond of it and resisting it. So it's only applicable in very, very few places for now. Now, when it comes to the size between an SB9 ADU, generally, typically, I'll say that the maximum allowable size for an ADU is 1,200 square feet. There are some caveats that's why I have an asterisk there. There are some caveats there that may allow you to build larger, but generally the blanket term statewide is up to 1,200 square feet. Whereas with an SB9 unit, there is no maximum size. It will entirely depend on how much, what your Florida area ratio is on your lot, how much space you have. You still cannot exceed the maximum amount of built space on your lot, which is the Florida area ratio. That's different by jurisdiction. Here in LA, I believe it's 45%. So based on the size of your lot, including what's already built with the single family and whatever you want to build with the SB9, that square footage cannot exceed 45% of your total lot size. But as far as specific restrictions within SB9, you can build it as big as you want as long as it is permissible on your property. Fees, there are more fees involved with SB9, whether it's a lot split or the two-unit development. You're going to pay more to the city. You're going to pay more through the process to do the necessary research and work. And like it says here, impact fees for the city, additional utility construction for the utilities if you need additional power or plumbing or otherwise. And for ADU units, there are fewer fees, especially if you build under 750 square feet. All of the impact fees are waived, and even if it's bigger than 12 or than 750 square feet, it still has reduced impact fees relative to an SB9 two-unit development. When it comes to taxes, a lot split, like Gloria mentioned, a lot split does not trigger a tax reassessment. Whereas for a two-unit development, to my understanding, it does trigger a reassessment only on the new construction, and that's what a blended assessment is for an ADU. So your existing single-family home is not reassessed. The value of your existing home stays exactly the same. They only evaluate any of the new construction that occurred and add that at today's rate, add that to your total tax. Property tax. So fewer fees involved and relatively lower taxes with ADUs, but look, as you can see here, they are more similar than not. Owner occupancy, we've discussed already. It is only required for an SB9 lot split. And I have an asterisk because of the note that Gloria mentioned. Whereas with ADUs, a traditional ADU does not have an owner occupancy requirement, only for junior ADUs. And finally, when it comes to utilities, typically SB9 units must have separate utility hookups, whereas ADU units can typically have shared utilities. So again, lower cost, less work that needs to go into it. Now,
John,
here's a few different examples.
I add one thing on that last slide?
Yeah,
So for the size requirements on the SB9, one thing I wanted to clarify is for the lot splits, the state allows you to build 2 units on each property of 800 square foot each. And that does not depend on FAR and setback. So no matter what, they have to allow that much development. In those cases, the setbacks, side and rear setbacks, will be reduced to 4 feet. So you don't always have to comply by FAR. If you can't comply by FAR and get the 4 units, you need to do FAR if you can, but if you can't, then you can build anyways, if that makes sense.
right. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just wanted to dive into a few different examples. Really, the point of these next few slides is just to show that there are unlimited options when it comes to how you can utilize the lot splits and the two-unit development um, in any way that you want, as long as it meets the standards. Gloria, would you like to introduce a few of these examples here?
Sure. Yeah. So on the top left, you have an example where you have your primary parent home, we could call it. You split the lot, and then maybe you build one other primary development home that you could have renters living in, you could have family living in, or perhaps you develop it and sell it off. In the center, we have a property where there's a duplex on one side, and so that accounts for 2 units. On the other property, there's two separate single-family dwellings. So you could have two single-family dwellings and two single-family dwellings, or you could have a duplex and a duplex. Like John said, there's so many different combinations that you can have.
And here's another example of a lot split, but with a flagpole lot. Gloria?
Yeah, so I saw some questions in the chat. People were asking if we can do flag lots. We absolutely can. We'll just want to take a look at your specific property and make sure that there's access, make sure we can get around if there's an existing garage like we see on the top image there. But typically, yeah, we can build with a flag lot, and it's a great way to use maybe unused property that's just sitting there and making you mow the lawn every couple of weeks.
And then here's a few examples of how you can really combine SB9 regulations with the ADU regulations. So here's an example of a lot that had a single family home. They added on to it to create a duplex with 2 units total. And then even though they had the SB9 unit, they were still able to add detached ADU to this property. Here you can see another example where they had the single family home, much like in this one, but instead of adding on to it, they created a detached SB9 unit right here. And then again, this is using the 2 unit development with ADU. They were able to still add a detached ADU here as well. Here's another example, similar but a little bit different. This is, I think, the slide that I showed earlier, the single family home. This is an SB9 unit, and they cut out a section of the existing single family to create a junior ADU within that space. Here's a similar example from this one, but instead of adding just one, they were able to add up to 2 detached ADUs on that same lot. And then finally, this is similar enough to the slide we just showed a moment ago. Here's the single family home. They cut out a corner of it to create the junior ADU, and then created a flag lot by splitting the lot right here. And again, on this new lot, they were able to add an SB9 unit as well as a detached ADU. And I really love this guy, Alfred Twu. He has really amazing examples on his website, but here's an example of a large home. And what they ended up doing here was con- cutting out a chunk of that existing home to create a junior ADU, like the example from the previous slide. And then they built a second unit. This is the SB9 one in the back, and an accessory dwelling unit on that same lot. So much like a previous example, but I really love how this kind of showcases all the different ways that, regardless of what kind of lot you have, how you can make it work for you.
All right, so I'll share a bit more about our firm and services that we can offer homeowners if you're interested in having help with your lot split. It is a very complex and arduous process to do the lot split, I'm not gonna lie. Some people try to do it themselves, and we've had a lot of people come back to us and be like, can you please take this up because this is really, really hard. A lot of the planners, like I said, still aren't completely sure what SB9 is and what the qualifications are. And so that's where we come in to take clients' projects from start to finish. We offer a concierge level service where we complete the lot split for our clients. We do all the hard work. We take on all the headaches with the planning departments. We do all the legal work, surveying, engineering, and drafting and project management. Like I said, we are highly specialized in SB9. That's all we do. On the right, you can see a map which shows all of our projects that we have throughout the state. So there's no place in California where it's not eligible, as long as it's within an urban area and single family residential. So we go from north to south. The reason why some clients decide to hire us for the lot split is because it obviously saves you a ton of time. This can take, if you're doing it on your own and you don't really know what you're doing, this could take you 2 years of your time, a lot of back and forth trying to figure out the process. We also will invest our money into your project. So we will pay for most of the hard costs for your project out of our own pocket. And we only ask that you pay us or reimburse us once we get approvals. So we have kind of a guaranteed process built into our model because it can be a risky process. So we want to make sure that we're actually delivering for you guys and you're not just paying an arm and a leg and hoping that we get an approval. So we don't charge time and materials. It's a flat rate fee based on whether or not we get approval for you. And yeah, like I said, we have 150 projects throughout the state. We have an eligibility checker tool that is free to use, which I think, John, you'll be sharing it with them at some point. And that allows you to plug in your address, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of whether or not the property is eligible for a lot split. It's probably about 90 to 95% correct answer. The final 5 or 10% is just nuanced specifics that we would have to look at more specifically to just confirm that it is eligible. So if you guys do want us to look at your particular project, we're happy to give you a free consultation, let you know, if your property is eligible, what the process might look like. And there's no pressure. We're just super happy to help and happy to educate homeowners. One other thing I want to mention is we do work with developers and real estate agents and investors. And so if you're like, this is awesome, but I probably don't have the money to invest in the split or the development, we have a lot of people that are looking to purchase properties and looking to put their money into these kind of projects. So if you don't have the money or the time, you can still reach out to us and we can probably pair you with the right person who would love to have maybe a part of your backyard or side yard.
Excellent. Thank you, Gloria. And she mentioned the lot split feasibility check. I have added the link within the chat. And then also how to book a free consultation. We have the same form. Go ahead and fill out the form if you want to talk to either of us about an SB9 project. Within the form, if you select a lot split, you'll get connected to Gloria and her team of experts. If you select a 2-unit development, you'll connect with my Maxable experts, but either way, you'll be in good hands. So last month, someone demanded that I have a QR code because they're easier than clicking on links in the chat, and I respect that. So I did a QR code. If you'd like, you can all hold your phones up to the screen right now, take a picture of this QR code so you can save it for later, or just go ahead and click the link within the chat. Like I said, if you're just interested and not ready to have a conversation, that's totally okay. And if you are ready to discuss your specific property, if you want to talk to an expert about either or both options when it comes to the approach for SB9, we'd be happy to help. So without any further ado, we have a lot of questions to get through and we have a little bit of time. So let's do it. Gloria, do you have the list up in front of you as well?
I do. Do you want me to start us off?
I'll let you start us off. Yeah.
Okay. Someone asked, how does SB9 interact with CCNRs, HOAs? CCNRs and HOAs are private agreements, and so they do still matter. If you have a CCNR that says you cannot split your lot, you can technically split your lot. The state isn't going to prevent that, but you might get sued by your neighbors. So you will want to honor your private agreements or check in with your neighbors and your HOA to see if they can modify the laws. And someone asked if SB9 can override local zoning or charter city exemptions. Yeah, the short answer is yes. There was a couple months there where charter cities thought they were special and they didn't have to do lot splits, but now with SB 450, the state is like, sorry, you're just another city. So there's really no differences with a charter city. We can still do lot splits there. And yes, SB9 does override local zoning laws. When you are developing, though, you do have to abide by the local zoning rules, like in terms of what and how you can build a home. And let's see here. Do, do, do.
What
So somebody
haven't we
asked
covered?
if can SB9 be used if there's already an existing structure versus an empty lot. You can do a lot split on a vacant parcel, but keep in mind that because of the occupancy requirement, there will need to be some sort of a structure on the lot by the end. So even if it's I think you could have a trailer or like a small prefab home. You could pop it on the land. As long as someone can live there at the end of the process, that's fine. So you could split an empty lot. You can also, if there's two homes on the property, you can split it and have one home on each. Keep in mind that that will require separate utilities for both homes if they are on separate properties. Should I keep going, John, or do you want to jump in?
I'll take it. I'll take a couple. There was one question asking of if SB9 applies within coastal zones. The answer is yes. That is not a restricted zone for SB9. However, it can be subject to additional roadblocks. It's subject to the California Coastal Act, and it does also require a separate development permit, and that can further complicate things. So if you are in a coastal zone and you're considering an SB9 unit, that's certainly a conversation that you should have with one of us and with someone local in your city from the planning department, just to discuss, okay, what does this process specifically look like here and how does that work? Um, what else? I think we might have touched it, but if not, can SB9 be used on a property within an HOA? The answer is SB9 is allowed. It depends if your HOA will allow it. They do have a right to deny projects and introduce more specific standards or total restrictions on SB9. So that is a question not for any of us, but specifically for your HOA.
And someone had asked if an existing house can be demolished as part of an SB9 project. Yes, unless it has been occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years. If so, then you cannot touch it. You could demolish it potentially before the lot split, but not as part of the SB9 project.
Here's a question about parking requirements. That's a good one. You want to cover that one?
Yeah, SB9 requires one off-street parking per property unless you're within a half a mile of a high-quality transit corridor, which we believe they mean a bus stop. It's a fancy word for a bus stop. So if you're within a half mile, don't need an off-street parking.
Perfect. Um, how long does it take? What are the main challenges? Oh, Gloria, is there a spreadsheet or calculator that folks can use to calculate ROI?
I love this question. We are actually working on one right now. So not yet, but we'll have it out for folks hopefully in the next month or so.
Perfect. Well, we'll be sure to send it to everybody on this webinar. Um,
And someone had
all
asked, how does
right. Yeah.
SB9 impact inheritance or estate planning
Mm,
situations? I'll let you speak as well, John, but I'll just say that a lot of our clients use SB9 to enhance their estate planning situation because you're literally creating a separate real estate asset that can be passed down. So if you have multiple kids, you're now increasing the diversity of assets which you can, put into your estate. Anything else you want to add on that, John?
no, I don't have anything else to add on that. I'll lean on your expertise there. All right. Do you see any other questions in that list that you want to cover? I'm going to look through the chat to see if there's
Someone said,
anything
how
else.
does SB9 apply to properties with barn or storage structures? So typically that's not an issue if you have some random structures on your property, but if you have, let's say you do a split and on the vacant parcel you only have a garage or you only have a pool, they will make you demolish the accessory structure on the new lot if there is no primary structure. It's kind of a weird law, but you must have at least one primary structure on the new lot if you're going to have also a accessory structure. I see a couple
Perfect.
hands raised.
Oh, yeah, there are a few questions. Don or Art, you
Art,
still
why
have a
don't you take
question?
it?
Say that again?
Art, you're mute. Art, you're muted, but if you want to come off mute, feel free to ask your question.
All right, let me go.
Okay.
I'm wondering why there's a 25-foot regulation for access to the property, street access.
Don, you're in Fairfax, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, good to see you again. So I think that has to do with fire restrictions, if I remember correctly. That doesn't apply to all jurisdictions. There's not always going to be a 25-foot wide requirement, but in certain places they will require that.
Any way to get around that?
For your particular property, I can take a look. It's very property specific. So if you want to send me an email, we can look into that.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I'd
just so
really
the
like
fire
to.
department can have a turnaround.
All right,
Okay,
thank
let
you.
me see. Art, did you also have a question?
I
Oh, you're muted again, Art.
yeah, I can't it shows me unmuted.
I can hear you now.
Yeah,
Hear
we can hear you.
me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, we met Gloria quite a while ago. I don't know if you had a fixed fee for doing the complete split. And is what is that fee now?
So that depends on the property, the risk involved, the complexity
Anybody hear my
involved.
question?
Yeah, can you hear me, Art?
Okay.
I will.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So it does depend
Uh,
on the project. I can reach out to you specifically. I'll make a note to reach out and we can talk about pricing. It does typically range from 45 to $75,000 all completed. And again, that's only if we get approval for the project, and that includes all the hard and soft costs for the project. But I'll reach out to you specifically, Art.
and last when we last spoke, you did not do Riverside County.
We
Do
are
you
working in
do
Riverside County.
Riverside County now?
Yep, we're working in all jurisdictions now.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for your questions.
Okay,
Thank you, Art.
because
Let's
we
take
have
these last
we have
three hands that are raised. Lisa, do you have a question for us?
Yes, I'm curious about the certificate of compliance and how it helps or hinders a SB9 lot split.
That's a good question. I don't have an answer off the top of my head, Lisa, but let me look into that and I can get back to you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, of course. I think I have your email, so thanks for your question.
All right. Kelly, do you still have a question, Kelly?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Thanks for all this information. Super, super helpful and inspiring. I think two questions. One, I did the checker eligibility and I can see I am not eligible because I am a high fire zone. So, but I also saw in the preview literature that that was parenthetical sometimes a problem. So if there could be maybe more information on if it would be possible for me to become eligible and or what are the hurdles there. The second question is just around if I was looking at a 2-unit option and the primary home is already there at 1,200, would the second unit have to be 800? Those are my two questions. Thank you in advance. Over.
Mhm. Yeah, so for the fire, that's a great question, Kelly. Most of the time, the very high fire zone is actually not a disqualifier. We just have to make sure we're meeting the fire mitigation measures. That might look like a wide driveway or fire sprinklers, but typically it is not an issue. So I would recommend send us an email or book a call with my colleague Joseph, and we'll double check your property and see if it is eligible. And John, did you want to answer the question about the
Thank you.
development?
Sorry, what was that, Gloria?
Kelly, what was your specific question again about the development? Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, the second one is if I went under the SB9 for the 2-unit option, but the primary house that's existing is 1,200 square feet. Would I still be able, of course, coverage, questionable, but would I still be able to do a 1,200 square foot? There was something about both units had to be 800 square feet. One is already existing, though, at
Yeah,
1,200. And the second one I would want to do, 8 to 1,200 as well, if possible. Is that
so
clear?
what that was referring to is that the state mandate is that every city must allow at least a 800 square foot SB9 unit. That does not mean that's a maximum necessarily. The more detailed response would be it really depends on your local jurisdiction and your Florida area ratio. If you can build beyond that 800 square foot, like Gloria mentioned earlier, and corrected the note that I made in that it can be allowed, but it is up to local jurisdiction. You are, regardless of the Florida area ratio, you are allowed to build at least one 800 square foot SB9 unit. However, going beyond that 800 square feet is agency local dependent.
I'd like to jump in real quick. I saw this repeating question in the chat about how the loan is affected. So a lot of people have a loan or mortgage on their existing property and they're wondering how the split affects it. The short answer is it doesn't impact your loan. And the bank doesn't even get notified. They don't need to approve the process because they are not having any added risk in the process. In fact, since you're increasing the value, the loan will essentially spread onto both properties. So a mortgage loan does not need to be renegotiated unless you decide to sell off one of the parcels that you split, and then you'll want to renegotiate with the bank, or you'll need to renegotiate with the bank. And that was for Jay Martinez. I saw your question in the chat if you're still here.
Great. I see an easy one in the chat that I can answer quickly. For the owner occupancy affidavit for a lot split, do you have to occupy both lots or just one?
Just one. Yeah, you can't live in two places at once. So as long as you stay in one house on one of the properties, that works.
Okay, I'm going to take two more hands because they've been up the longest. Ian, do you still have a question?
Yes, my question is about easements. I have a over a quarter acre, and it's a long lot, but it's thin, and I already have an easement for the driveway with a neighbor. So we share a driveway. Can you then use that same easement to access the back lot? It does go to the back end all the way.
Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. We'll have to kind of navigate the private agreement with your neighbor to make sure that they're willing to share it with the new lot, and the road maintenance agreement and all that, but that is not an issue.
Okay, and it is part of my property, not that.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Does
Yeah,
that
and if
make a
you wanna,
difference?
that is better that it is on your property because at the end of the day, you'll have the final say on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you have specific questions, you can also send us an email or book a call.
And then I have a second question. We were talking about fire area. The because it's so long, I'm in a high fire risk, but the people around me who have the shorter lots are not, just because of that. And if I cut the lot to be shorter, one lot wouldn't be in the fire risk area and the other lot would just stay in the fire risk area. Does that make a
That
difference?
doesn't really matter. We will want to look at the fire mitigation measures
Okay.
and just see if the city or the county has any requirements for you. One thing to keep in mind, it sounds like you have a long, skinny lot, and so typically if it's more than 150 feet from the road to a back home, they'll
Yes.
require you to have a fire turnaround. So keep that in mind. You might be required to have like a T-shaped driveway where a fire truck could theoretically turn around back there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and we are way over time, but I'm going to take the last question. Dexter, do you still have a question? Let's hear it.
Yeah, great presentation, you guys. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the process when doing an SB9 duplex conversion and building an ADU. I built an ADU in the past, but I don't know how it works when you combine them both. Do you apply for both simultaneously?
Yeah, you would apply for both simultaneously, and it's a very similar permitting process. Essentially, I say that ADUs have been around longer, so cities are more competent or comfortable handling the permitting of those projects and approving those plans. SB9 might take a little bit longer, even with the two unit, just because it is a relatively newer concept, and local agencies are just figuring out how to do it. But yeah, I would say that is the right approach. You do them both in tandem because you want to make sure that you don't start with one and then have the city restrict you from doing the other one. So yeah, the right approach is plan them all together. You can have them all together on the same plan set, I believe. And yeah, where are you located, Dexter?
So this would be in San Diego, and
Okay.
specifically, can you phase in the occupancy, the certificate of occupancy, the final inspection? Can you phase that in and start renting out maybe the ADU while you're finishing up the SB9 duplex?
I believe so. I believe so. I'm not positive, but I don't see why you couldn't. We just actually recently finished a project like what you're describing, identical to one of the examples I showed earlier. There was a single family home. We added an SB9 unit detached in the backyard and simultaneously extended the attached garage out forward to make it a little bit bigger and converted that garage into an ADU. So we did both projects simultaneously. That reduced the that made the project a little bit more affordable because we were able to work with the same architect to develop everything together. We were able to work with the same contractors to build out four bathrooms instead of two kitchens instead of one. We could do the foundations all at the same time. We can do, phase the project a lot better because there was more to it for a contractor and for the designer.
That's
So
awesome. Thank
that's
you so
a
much,
good way
guys.
to do it.
Hell of a job.
Dawn, I
All right,
just
we
really
have,
forgot to mention the symposium. Can I
oh,
mention that really quick?
yes, go for it.
All right, I know we're late after that time, but real quick, there is another remote digital talk about SB9 development on November 6th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So if you are interested to learn more about what you can do with your backyard or you just want to be informed, this will be a great symposium with 5 or 6 different speakers. We got planners, I'll be on the board. There'll be a couple different people speaking. And John just put the link in the chat. Thank you, John. So you can click on that and register if you just want to keep eating up all this SB9 information.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good call. If there's anything that we missed, if there's anything that we were unsure about, or if I'm sure there are questions that we were not yet able to answer during this session. So there's going to be 6 experts there. There's only 2 of us here. So it's going to be a ton of value as well. They're going to go much deeper into your financing options, the overall approach. There's going to be lenders on there, architects. I believe there's a contractor, engineers from Rikers. So that'll be a really helpful session as well. So if you really enjoyed this and want to keep going, definitely join that webinar as well. And I will include a link in the follow-up email in case you miss it here. We went a little bit over time, Gloria, but I am so happy that so many of you were happy to stick around and keep watching. Like Dexter said, I think we covered a lot of ground. So thank you, Gloria. Small round of applause for Gloria's guest feature on our webinar. I appreciate all of you and staying involved throughout the session. I'm sorry there's probably a few dozen questions we still didn't have a chance to answer, but Gloria put her email in the chat. Well, I want to put my email in the chat too, even though everyone's gotten emails from me if they're on this session. But either way, I also added a link to the interest form. Again, if you want to talk to an expert about an SB9 project, whether it's a lot split with Gloria's team or 2 unit with our team or both, click on that link, fill out the form, and we'll get in touch with you. You can schedule a call directly within that form, and that's it. So thank you, Gloria. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we'll see you next month for another great ADU or SB9 topic.
Thank you so much, John, for hosting. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, guys.
Have a
Great job, you
wonderful
guys.
Fun.
Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.